Good morning and welcome to the Innovative Educator Summit. My name is Jen O'Brien and I'm with Hawks Learning. On behalf of the entire Hawks family, I want to thank you for attending this annual event. I'd also like to take a moment to express our appreciation for all of the speakers presenting today and tomorrow. We're fortunate to be able to bring together so many talented individuals from the educational community to provide this professional development opportunity. And we certainly wouldn't be able to do it without your contributions, so thank you. Over the next 2 days, we will have over 50 speakers presenting on a variety of topics across multiple disciplines. It's our goal to bring to you an expansive lineup of speakers covering diverse topics that we hope you'll find relevant to your own professional experience. All sessions will be recorded, and we will send out information on how to access the recordings after the conference. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce our keynote session of the day. Tracy M. leads a global leadership development practice where she coaches corporate executives, small business owners, and private clients. She has over 25 years of global executive leadership experience and most recently served as the Director of Public Affairs for Maryland Insurance Administration. Since 2012, she has been an adjunct professor at McDaniel College and Notre Dame of Maryland University, where she focuses on strategic communications, digital marketing, and leadership. Her students consistently praise her for the ability to create an inclusive learning environment where they can thrive and grow as global citizens. Tracy, thank you for joining us today, and I will let you take it from here. Oh, and I think you're still on mute.
There we go.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Jen. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. So, good morning, innovative leaders and educators. How's everybody doing? I think for my presentation, what I really wanted to focus on is we all acknowledge that the landscape has really evolved and shifted, and that today's college students have more reason than ever to leave without graduating. They've got everything from rising tuition, student debt, academic challenges, mental and physical health concerns, not to mention all the geopolitical uncertainty and sort of the topsy-turvy economy where they may or not feel like they can find employment. But as faculty leaders, I really think that it's important that we help students not only survive, but thrive, grow, graduate, and find employment. And so our role not only is to champion the value of an education, but continue to be flexible and focused on the student's success, both inside and outside of the classroom. And I really believe our job is to mentor, lead, coach, and guide in a much more intentional way these days. And so it's through modeling high emotional intelligence and practicing our own self-care that we're going to be able to teach our students what they need to know to become more resilient in today's ever-changing world. So if I go back to when I first was hired to teach, I really thought about, I'm trained to teach. I've got something to add to my students' body of knowledge, and we continue to play that critical role. But that said, today's students really need to have a consistent sense of belonging, competence, and social engagement while they're in the classroom. And so that means our role has now evolved, and we have a changed set of expectations from not only the students, but from the institutions where we teach. We're being asked to continue to make sure that our classrooms are warm, open, organized, and that it promotes that sense and feeling of belonging. And so we want to do things like interact with our students where we know their names, we know their preferred pronouns, we talk to them before and after class, we smile, we show empathy, and we really praise their performance and actively respond so that we're creating that positive faculty-student relationship. So when I was putting this together, I wanted to look at the profile of today's students and really understand more about who's in our classroom. And for the most part, it's Gen Z, and they're the newest cohort to really arrive on campus. And they're the most racially and ethnically diverse than any other generation that's come to higher education. 1 in 4 Gen Zers is Hispanic, 14% are Black or people of color, 6% are Asian, and 5% are biracial. It's also estimated that up to 30% of them are neurodiverse. That could be anything from autism to ADHD to dyslexia or any other pattern outside the neurotypical mainstream. And this compares to 15% of the overall population, or 30%, 15% of the population. So it's a larger percentage than the general population. And if you think about it, Gen Z has been largely influenced by growing up in the Great Recession and witnessing their family members lose jobs, lose their housing. And so therefore, they're relatively fiscally conservative as a result. And so they're actually more skeptical about the high cost of a four-year institution and a degree, while at the same time enrollment numbers continue to drop from pre-pandemic levels. So what's kind of going on? Well, if you think about it, there's VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That's sort of the backdrop. And so they've been influenced by not only the pandemic, but things like geopolitical instability, the global economy, technology and automation, school shootings, domestic terrorism, and the racial reckoning. So they've been raised by Gen X parents, and they've been taught to think and work strategically and make the trade-offs. And as a result, what they really care about is sustainability and social accountability. Important issues to them are healthcare, mental health, higher education, economic security, civic engagement, racial equity, and the environment. And what they're really looking for is good career preparation, interesting coursework, and professors who care about their well-being. So what's that mean for us? It basically means we need to put our oxygen mask on first. So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our own self-care. In a study done by Boston University, 80% of faculty nationwide said that they've had a one-on-one conversation with a student in the past year about their mental health. And 20% of those faculty reported that that negatively impacted their own mental health. And so faculty members are actually taking on the emotional workload and the emotional labor in order to care for the students in the way that they feel they need to be cared for. Now, don't get me wrong, our job is still to facilitate learning and growth. And we've been expected to do research, show scholarship, provide instruction, and give service back to the college and the community. And if you think about what an effective teacher is, we have expert pedagogical skills, strong communication skills. We have a passion for our profession, and we know how to manage our classrooms, in addition to just the basics, which is a solid knowledge of our subject matter. And so we recognize that our fundamental obligation continues to be to help students move efficiently through post-secondary education. But know that these Gen Zers are discerning customers and consumers, and they can quickly filter through content and determine whether or not it's worth their time. And despite being digital natives, they really value support and service as part of their educational experience, which includes having us as their mentors, coaches, guides, and teachers. So when I think about the pandemic, I felt like a first responder more than a teacher. I was expected to become more like a social worker or a therapist, and yet I had no training. I didn't even know what I was supposed to be doing. And so I had to quickly figure out, what are the signs I should be looking for? What are the resources that are available to my students who are in distress? And so as I navigated teaching 100% online, I began to develop relationships with my academic deans, with administrative staff, and others. So we've now moved back into face-to-face, and I continue to wear my first responder hat every day when I step into the classroom. The other thing is, we have to kind of figure out what's going on underneath the surface, just like an iceberg. And so we have to become a little bit more like detectives when we notice our students are withdrawing. Many of my students don't even have support systems, and this trend continues. Depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation and intent, eating disorders, and substance misuse are the top 5 mental health challenges facing college students today. And each one of these has specific signs and symptoms that also vary by person. And so in our roles, we should really focus on raising our antenna so we can spot someone who's at risk and then gently encourage them to seek help from the professionals that know how to deal with that. So I really encourage you to know what resources are available. Many colleges and universities have been able to step up their mental health services. They have a variety of digital and telehealth options now. And so a lot of these resources got stood up and strengthened throughout the pandemic. And so a lot of the kinks have been worked out, but you should know what they are so that you can refer out as quickly as possible. And when you think about well-being, this is for our students and for ourselves. The Center for Creative Leadership basically says there's 6 different keys to well-being. So it's not only the well-being of our students, it's also our well-being. And so part of our job is to understand that everyone wants to have a purpose. They want to feel a sense of growth. They need to take care of their health, physical and mental. In order to give you agency, everyone wants a connection to each other, and we've got to learn how to be more resilient. And that's what I really want to focus on. Creating that climate of psychological safety within the classroom is really about building that trusting relationship where the students have space and they can talk to you about what's happening with them. Part of maintaining this rapport and engagement is celebrating their successes and really truly showing them that you care about them. One thing that I do is I follow campus news and events, and I comment on their achievements, whether it's in a sporting event or it's some kind of recognition that they got through a club that they're involved in. And I try to connect it with them on a personal level. And so, how can we really teach resilience? Again, it's creating that safe and learning environment, focus on developing that environment where they feel safe to be seen and supported, and really listening and being practicing those active listening things that we know that we can do. So, being present with them, commit to regular conversations with them, and then provide opportunities where they can share their goals with you and whatever they're reflecting on, but also share your experiences as well. Many times they want to hear what you've been through and that what they're going through is it's going to be okay. And so I know a lot of campuses now are trying to create this sense of belonging within the school, the overarching school community, but you can do it within your classroom as well. I want to continue to just remind you to stay true to your North Star. Remember why you signed up for this assignment and come back to it, right? And follow that passion that you had from the very beginning. We've all been through so much over the last 3 years, and we're coming out of it, and we want to come out of it stronger as faculty members, but we also, our students are looking to us for this leadership. Not only are they looking to us for our subject matter expertise, but they're looking to us as older, you know, ahead of them on their journey, their human journey. And so staying true to your North Star is really going to be critical, and reminding yourself of the passion that you had for this subject matter, but then also connecting with your students. And then the other thing, I feel like Ellen, spread some kindness. Remember what you say and how you say it matters. And so it's really important that you work to be present in the classroom and that you work to listen for nuances and that you give the impression to your students that you're approachable. I've had so many students tell me that their professors are not approachable, and that just is so disheartening to me. Part of our role is to be those mentors, leaders, and guides, and to provide that coaching and that support in a way that is constructive, and that they feel like they have another resource that they can go to, especially if they don't have the resources in their family, or they're not finding it elsewhere on the campus. And so familiarizing yourself with what resources are available for them and bringing those resources into the classroom so that then they can share that with each other. I encourage my students to share amongst themselves what's working for them And so I always try to do a checkpoint when I first start the class and when I end the class to just make sure that I'm checking in with them, not only for understanding of the content that I'm sharing, but just where they are. And if there's something that's happened in the world that I think is going to trigger them or is going to upset them or they're not going to understand, I want to discuss that. I want to create that environment where they feel like they have a forum where they can be who they are and they can share their feelings and their perspectives, as diverse as they may be. And I think that that's our role. We may be the only person on the campus that they feel this safety with, that they can reach out to. And so I think it's imperative that we understand that role that we play and that we create that space for them. And so that's really kind of my message for today. I really do think that in order for us to take care of our students and to engage with them and to capture their hearts and minds, I feel like we need to take care of our own well-being, both mental, physical, and all the things that we know we should be doing so that we can show up as healthy as we can be to then be that strong guide, be that strong leader, be that mentor that they are looking for in our particular subject matter of expertise. And so I really want to just say, if you want to connect with me, I'd love to connect with you. I wanted to leave some of this keynote available so that we can talk amongst ourselves about what we're seeing on our campuses and share ideas about what's working, share ideas around maybe innovative ways that we are connecting with our students and creating that sense of belonging, and allowing them to be successful, not drop out, go all the distance of not only getting their academic credentials, but then positioning them so that they can be successful in the work world. And I'm very passionate about preparing them and making sure that they have the skills and the knowledge and the ability to then go forward into their first internship, into their first job, and continuing that relationship with them into their second job. I love bringing my students back into the classroom to tell their stories, to give hope to today's current students, and to give advice. I think that by telling our stories, that can be very impactful. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to open it up to Q&A, so that we can have a dialogue for the remainder of the session.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate that. We do have a few questions that have come in. For everyone who wants to type in a question, you'll see at the very bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. Just click that and type it in and we'll see that here. First was a comment, which I really liked. Not a question, just a comment. I love the idea of a teacher as a first responder. Certainly that's something we've seen over those past couple of years.
Yeah, it really took, honestly, it took me by surprise when I first realized that that was what was happening. And I realized that, and this was kind of in the beginning of the pandemic when we went from in-person to hybrid. And then my heart broke as I had students that were had thought they were coming to a 4-year college to have the experience of sports and sororities, fraternities, and they were back home in their childhood bedroom. And my heart just broke because I could see the struggle that they were having. And so I thought, I'm the only person that they're really interfacing with on Zoom where they feel like, I can be there for them. And so that was when I first reached out to the academic deans and said, what am I supposed to do? I'm not a trained social worker. I'm not a therapist. But I know the student is struggling. I don't want them to drop out. I think they're a great person. I think they have a lot of potential. I just feel like this has set them back in so many ways. And so that was really when I was putting this together, I was like, yeah, we became first responders, right? And so it was incumbent upon us to reach out for those resources and to really get familiar with them so that we could refer people. The other thing, I do have quite a number of students that require accommodations. And so I became much more familiar with the academic counseling services that my college has and working closely with them to help the students be successful, whether they had some kind of neurodivergent, learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the next question, how do you respond to students who aren't likely to engage with the class or with the instructor? They're quiet and they don't do a lot of responding or interacting.
Yeah, well, so I do a lot of breakout groups and pairing people for teams. One of the things I really want my students to feel confident public speaking, because I feel like if they're going to go into marketing or communications, they're going to need to be quick on their feet and be able to stand up and speak in front of a group. So I mix it up a lot and I put them in these small groups, and then I kind of walk the room and I try to engage with them in a smaller group setting, because I find that some students just they don't want to interact in front of 30 kids or in front of even 14 kids. And so a lot of times I will try to, and in the beginning of the semester, I usually ask them a lot of questions about themselves to know what is my connection point to them. Do they ride horses? Do they play sports? Are they in student government? Something about them that lights them up that I can connect back to throughout the whole entire semester. And I can ask them questions, before class, after class, during class, about something that I know that's really important to them.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Next question, I want to be there for my students and I also want to have healthy boundaries. How can we assure that we do both?
I think that's a really great question, Lindsay. Boundaries are super important, super, super important. And I think it's just, you're not their friend, you are their professor. And keeping that always in the back of the mind in terms of, establishing and being very clear about what your boundaries are. I do have one student that at the beginning of the semester, he's on the autism spectrum and he was texting me at 11 o'clock at night. I went to his academic counselor and I was like, I can't, like, what are we doing here? And she was the one that said, you have to be very clear in terms of, I gave you my cell phone number not to text me at 11 o'clock at night because that's what came up in your brain, but for emergencies. And I need you to package up all your questions and email them to me, and I will get back to you in 24 hours. And so a lot of it is being very, very clear about what your boundaries are in terms of your availability, in terms of, just what you will and will not accept. And so it's very much incumbent upon us as the faculty to establish those boundaries, because some students aren't going to know you've hit the guardrail.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question, how would you modify your ideas with a class of 400 plus students, so a larger classroom?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that maybe one idea that I would maybe think about is, could you have office hours for like a smaller group, or like have a lecture for like a much smaller group? Or I know it's extra work on your part, but to sort of personalize, or maybe you do it by cohort or you do it by year in college, but to create forums that are smaller, that could be maybe more them getting to know you or you getting to know them. So that's what I would encourage, is to somehow use your time, and maybe you change up the way instead of lecturing in a hall to 400 people or online or whatever, is there a way to skinny it down to a more manageable number?
Yeah. What about, are there any resources of which you're aware along the lines of counseling for non-counselors?
So I know many universities, when I was researching this, many universities and colleges have started to put those things together. They've partnered with, somebody like a BetterHelp, or, some of these therapy services to offer that. And so I would encourage you to work with maybe your wellness center on campus to see if you could bring that to the faculty. I know where I am, they have done that. They have, offered up to us exactly that. And they've also provided us with sort of like, what is it called? Like on-demand training, it through different services. So there is training out there, and there are companies out there that sell that service to colleges and universities. And I know my college has undertaken that so that we can get a little more trained, right, on if these are the top 5 things that are, affecting college students, what are those specific warning signs, so that we're a little bit more up to speed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the next one, someone mentioned that they really like the approach you said you take with the new student population. However, how do you handle students who don't want to follow rules and want the students to change things at their discretion?
Okay, I take command of my classroom, and I'm very firm from the very beginning that, this is the way it's going to be. Yes, I will be flexible. However, um, this is how we're going to run the railroad. And so I take control from the very start, from the very first class, even before the first class, in terms of when I set up the learning management system and I do my communications and my outreach to them. And even within my syllabus, all of the things that, I am the subject matter leader. And I really, I stand in my power as the leader. And if you don't like the way things are going, then you can get off the bus. Like, I'm very clear about that. And I'm very clear about how things are going to go and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Because I feel like those types of students, it, they just cause chaos. And so you've got to take command from the beginning. And then it seems to go. And then you can loosen up as you need to. And sometimes I'll even have conversations one-off with those students.
Yeah. How can a teacher encourage students to seek help from tutors, financial aid, and mental health?
So in the very first class, I always talk about those services, and I try to bring them up throughout the semester. And I also try to get students to speak to it and what they've gotten out of it. Um, on my campus, we have a pretty large team of tutoring, counseling services, and things like that. And students, I continue to remind them that they're out there. We have a writing center; they can get help with writing. And so when I give different assignments, I'll kind of put a plug in. So I try to put plugs in throughout the semester about what's out there and that they should seek it. And then, because now I've built relationships with the leaders of those departments on campus, I'm able to interface with them and refer, one-to-one, hey, you want to go see Jen, right? So it's more personal.
That's smart. Makes a lot of sense because, it might not be relevant at the beginning of the semester, but
Right.
throughout they have those reminders. We had someone share an idea they had. I think that's also great. If anyone wants to put in addition to questions, you can share any strategies that you've used in your classroom to engage with your students and make those connections. We had someone share that a few years ago, they hosted an English fair where they had graduates Zoom in to talk to current majors, which I thought was a great idea. Next question. I loved your comment about kindness. Kindness costs nothing and gives back so much. So many teachers believe that they are upholding standards when they are strict with students. How do you think we can change to a culture of kindness?
So in my view, it starts at the top. I'm very fortunate that the president of my college is a kind person and has been a faculty member and has kind of, climbed through the ranks. I think she sets the tone. So I do think that the leadership team of the administration sets the tone. And I am part of sort of the leadership team of the adjunct faculty. And so I think that getting everybody on the same page. We also have recently, I guess it was during the pandemic, created a provost position for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And there's a lot of elements that go into that. And there's been a lot of training around how to create a sense of belonging, and kindness is a big part of that. So I think it has to get embedded into, it has to start at the top, but then it has to be woven into sort of the fabric, and even like, you know, um, faculty evaluations and expectations, right? It has to be part of the expectations of this is how you behave properly. And yes, you do have to set the rules, but at the same time, just know that some students have bad days, just like we have bad days, right? And so how can we be there for them?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, another suggestion or something that someone has tried and successfully used to connect with students and provide a stronger support system. Collaborating with my colleagues, librarians, academic advisors, and professors from other disciplines has been a coping strategy. We've co-presented at conferences, co-authored articles for publication. We try to collaborate in front of my students so that they feel free to connect with others, even when they can't connect with me.
I think that's a great idea. And I think that is something that when I was doing my research for today, a lot of the kind of like I don't want to say the best, but, top tier colleges of all different sizes, they've done that, right? It's been, a way for faculty and staff and the administration to sort of support each other so that and to share their best practices. And so I think that's a great strategy that should continue, really, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we had someone ask, how have you modified your classroom management since the pandemic? For example, clarify that before and after class is a good time for non-course related work.
So before the pandemic, it was in person. Then it became like immediately 100% online. And then we went to sort of a modified hybrid, but then we went back because people, it's a residential college, so people were getting COVID. And then we have I think this is only the second semester that it's been back 100% in person. But yes, I always try to give myself a buffer. I tried to come to the classroom at least a half an hour early and stay a half an hour later or more. And I tell people that is sort of my office hours. Like, if you really want to get me, I'm 100% all in. I'm blocking that time, not just for the class, but before and after. And so I'm here for you. And then also if they want to schedule, like I have a couple people that will schedule like Zoom calls with me just randomly. Like, I want to sit down and talk to you about XYZ. And so I think it's letting them know when you're available and when you're not available. But yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. We know it impacted a lot of things in academics and everywhere. There's a comment and a question that I think go well together. One comment is, I don't see that kindness and strictness are mutually exclusive, which I know you talked about kind of taking command of the classroom. So I'm sure that's sort of in line as well with,
Yes.
with your thoughts. And then a question to kind of pair with that is, what steps do you take to maximize that students meet their initial and late homework due dates and complete tests only during scheduled open available dates? So kind of strictly holding them accountable to those actual timelines.
Yeah, so one of the things that I started doing, not to become their babysitter, but I would use the announcement feature in the learning management system, and I would do reminders. Another thing that I used to do, I want to get back to, is and I had a professor when I was getting my master's degree did this, and he was my favorite professor because he did this. On Sunday nights, he would record a video and he would be like, "Hey, welcome to week 14 of the semester. Last week we did this," and he would do this like 5-minute video of like recap where we were, talk about where we were going, and he would talk about what was due that week. And so I started doing that. This was years ago, and I need to go back to it, but it was so helpful as a student to just prompt. And like, I was happy to watch a 5-minute video of him talking about where we were going, and just like reorient myself to the deliverables for the week. And so I've been trying to do that just through email, but I think I'm going to go back to the video option. In fact, I went to see a play one time, and this person comes running up to me and she's like, "Professor M." And I was like, I had no idea who this person was. Well, she had recognized me from the videos. She was one of my students who I had never met. And I was like, wow, that made a difference for her too. And she said the same thing. She's like, these videos were the best thing ever, because I would watch it on, Sunday night. I would drop it because I would usually drop it like Sunday morning. They could watch it Sunday night, and then they would go into the academic week and know what they had to do and when it was due. So as much as it's, kind of annoying, you have to remind them again. But I do think that, something as simple as a video weekly does help. And I know some professors do audio as well, like a voice thread.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. I really liked this. Someone shared, they said that one of the first homework assignments in their composition course is find my office and leave me a note. So if you're on campus and in person, she said, the instructor said, the purpose is to assure myself that students know where to find me before an emergency arises. And then another question is, it sounds like you spend a lot of time helping individual students. How do you balance that with teaching multiple classes, doing your research, participating in volunteer organizations, attending conferences, et cetera, while maintaining a healthy balance for your own mental health?
So I do spend a lot of time with individual students just because that like brings me joy. It just really lights me up when I'm able to touch a specific individual. But I am very disciplined to my calendar. And one of the things that's in my calendar, like today, ride the Peloton, right? And so I do prioritize my self-care because I know that I have to be healthy. I have to eat right. I have to drink water. I have to do all the things, right, in order to be able to be strong, to maintain kind of the schedule that I keep. So I think it's really just it's somebody told me once you can tell a lot about somebody by their checkbook and their calendar, and I think that's really true, right? What do you spend money on and where do you spend your time? And so I think that it's being comfortable also saying no to certain things, and so getting comfortable saying no um, to certain things is really important.
Setting those boundaries and choosing what works best for you.
Yeah, the other tip, and I do this a lot with my private coaching clients, is I ask them to set their intentions for the week, and what they want to accomplish in the week. And it could be three things, like what are your intentions this week? I want to move this forward. I want to close this out, like whatever it is. And then at the end of the week, do a review at the end of the week to say, how did I do against my intentions? And recognizing that you can't do 25 things, you can do 3, right, and do them really well. And so just lowering kind of the bar in terms of what are the 3 most important things that I need to get done this week.
I love that. That works so well in education, personal life,
It does.
professionally. It's a really good suggestion. Another tip from an attendee here is they mentioned they're hosting both a virtual and live young alumni panel in April. And they said they're a firm believer in bringing your successful student graduates back and give your current students advice and tips, which is such a smart idea too. They also mentioned that they're a firm believer in being kind and approachable. It makes a huge difference.
It really does. It really does. And yeah, my students love hearing from alumni. They love hearing their story, what they thought they were going to be doing, what they did while they were in college, where they are today. And so I try to sprinkle my classes with those in between, like when I lecture, right? But the feedback that I routinely get is those are their favorite classes. Because I also ask the people that I also ask them to be mentors. And so, if somebody comes into the classroom and a particular student really, they resonate with each other, keep in touch, right? Like connect up with them, do a virtual coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looked like someone you had mentioned before, to be understanding that some students, just like us, they have bad days. Is that something where you'll alter requirements or expectation for the students, or how do you accommodate those bad days, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I try to work with the student. Every situation's a little bit different. I had last semester I had someone, her grandmother died right when we were in the midst of in my one communications class, they have to do a big presentation, and it's like the culmination of everything they've learned, and it's like 50% of their grade. Like it's a lot, right? And her grandmother died when she was put in hospice. And so it was like something like that. I went to the registrar and I'm like, look, I will accommodate this. She needs to go. She needs to be with her grandmother. It's over in California. And she and I worked it out so that, once she was through like her family crisis, we scheduled time. I just gave her an incomplete and I said, when you're settled, when you're ready, when you feel like your presentation is good, let's get on Zoom and you present it to me like you presented it to the whole class. And so I think it's working with the individual and the individual situation.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of different scenarios for having a bad day, and some
Correct.
inside
And a spectrum of bad days, right?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. We had a nice shout out from a librarian saying librarians are always happy to collaborate. So don't forget that if you're on campus and have not yet connected with your helpful librarian. Let's see, the next question here. I was and still am a 100% virtual teacher. As a college, we started using technology to help with things like using virtual reality. What kinds of things do you suggest to help a teacher connect with their learners?
That is yeah. I mean, I feel like virtual teaching is like its own thing. And I know a lot of where I teach, a lot of those faculty that have been there forever and a day that were like the traditional in classroom PhDs, they all retired because it was just the requirements were too much on the technology piece. And so I do think that it's a different way to interact. And I do think that um, you have to do things, maybe there's even something that you could do where you have office hours. I'm assuming you have office hours virtual, or maybe you pull people into smaller groups that you could get to know them. I do think that figuring out what makes those students tick and what they're passionate about is really the way to connect with them. Right. And I view myself as I'm learning from them. Like these Gen Z is teaching me so much and their perspective is so different than mine. And I feel like it's a two-way street, even though I'm the subject matter expert and I'm the teacher, they have so much to share with us on their perspectives. They've always had technology. They don't know what a payphone is, right? Like they don't know what a fax machine is. So even in like my digital marketing class, I teach them the history of the internet and they're like, they have no idea. Like, and I've lived through it, right? And so I do think that you have to be creative, I guess is my advice.
Yeah, I feel like in a synchronous class, if they are meeting virtually at the same time, it can be a little easier. But even in asynchronous classes, I'm sure in LMS, using the LMS with a discussion board and asking, some personal questions in addition that are fun for people to kind of engage and get to know each other a little bit better outside of just the academic questions can help.
Well, and I don't know if your college has this, but we have an instructional design team that's fabulous that teaches us how to use other technologies, plugins, those types of things to make it more engaging. And that person is like my new best friend. Like I never knew what a Wakelet board was. Now I have a Wakelet board and my students love it, right? And so she continuously runs these seminars where it's like lunch and learns that she will teach you how to use the technology for something that may be a little more interactive. So I'd
Yeah.
say look into that.
Yeah, absolutely. We had somebody who shared a tip. They said, I use target date rather than due dates and start the semester with a short unit on time management and procrastination. It helps students take control over their academic time rather than having it imposed upon them. I know that's something I feel like a lot of recent graduates say when they are done with college. I wish I learned more life skills, right? So being able to teach them something like time management, procrastination would help.
I think I'm going to take a page out of her book and start doing that. That's a great one. I hadn't even thought about that.
And then we had another tip. They said, a tip I always tell my students with regards to class, they might not have 100% to give every day, but I want 100% of their 80% or 60% or whatever it is they feel like they have in that given day, which is a really nice way to frame it.
I would agree.
And then another one, I haven't read through this yet, but it just came in. When teaching math online, it was hard to gauge when students were done with a few practice problems that I gave them to do during the session. I had them enter a themed emoji, how they're feeling, what they wanted for lunch that day, a weather emoji, favorite sport, etc. When they finished the problems. Then I knew when most of my students were done with the problem, but it became a fun way to interact. Sometimes it led us into brief discussion that let the students get to know each other and let the instructor get to know the students more. That's another creative idea.
Yeah, I've done the emoji thing when we're meeting on Teams. Sometimes I'll go back and forth between in person and if I'm bringing an outside speaker, rather than have them drive to campus or, by being online, they could be anywhere in the world, right? And so, but I'll use the emoji as well. But that's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And less than a minute left here, but one last one. I feel like you've touched on this a little bit, but do you have any advice for guarding against compassion fatigue?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to, your own self-care, and it goes back to, giving yourself grace and permission to not always, putting them first, but, taking care of yourself, right? And so I do think, just guarding against, like, just knowing what your limits are. It's knowing yourself more than anything, and
Yeah.
having those boundaries. And when are you going to be available and open for business for your students, right?
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tracy. I really enjoyed today's session. It looks like a lot of people got a lot from it, and we're also able to share their own tips, which I think is wonderful. So with that being said, we'll move on, and I'll share that the first concurrent session of the day is going to begin shortly in 15 minutes at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. You can view the chat for the next session meeting room links and a session feedback survey. You can also access the conference website for a complete list of concurrent sessions and their descriptions. While accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the virtual exhibit hall and say hi to the Hawks team. While there, you can view a quick 5-minute demonstration of our software, request your free t-shirt, and be entered to win an hourly $50 giveaway. Also, in addition, in the spirit of St. Patrick's Day coming up tomorrow, you'll find a few golden coins throughout the conference website. If you find one and click on it, you'll be entered into an additional raffle. We hope to see you at the next session.